Admiral Kethtar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the stars through the massive viewing window. His dark scales caught the light from the control panels, making him look like a living shadow against the backdrop of space. Around him, his crew worked quietly at their stations, their movements smooth and practiced. The Zephyrian hegemony had ruled this part of the galaxy for over 3,000 years. Their ships were the finest ever built, their weapons could destroy entire moons, and their shields could stop almost any attack. Kethtar had commanded fleets for 200 years, and he had never lost a battle. Today should be no different. "Sir, we're getting reports from the outer colonies again," said Communication Officer Velthos, her voice carrying a slight tremor. She was young, barely 50 years old, and this was her first major assignment. Kethtar turned his attention to her. "The humans, sir. They've taken 3 more systems in the past month." Kethtar made a dismissive gesture with his clawed hand. "Humans? These primitive mammals think they can challenge the hegemony?" Velthos pulled up the data on her screen. "According to our scouts, they still use chemical rockets for propulsion. Their weapons appear to be kinetic-based, throwing metal projectiles at their enemies. No energy shields detected. No antimatter reactors." The bridge crew exchanged glances. Several officers made quiet sounds of amusement. The idea that such backward creatures could pose a threat to the mighty Zephyrian fleet was almost laughable. Asked Tactical Officer Zendar, his 6 eyes focusing on the data display. "Single vessels mostly, sometimes small groups of 3 or 4. Kethtar nodded slowly. 50 primitive ships against his fleet of 200 advanced vessels. The humans had certainly chosen their enemies poorly. "Sir," interrupted Navigation Officer Rixtel, "we're receiving direct orders from High Command. We are to proceed to the Sol system immediately and—" "About time," Kethtar said. "Approximately 150 of their years, sir." Kethtar considered this information. Most species took centuries or even millennia to establish themselves beyond their home systems. The fact that humans had spread so quickly suggested they were either very lucky or very determined. Neither trait would help them against superior firepower. "Prepare the fleet for hyperspace jump," he commanded. "We'll make this quick and clean." As the crew began preparations, Kethtar reviewed what they knew about human space. The species had emerged from a planet called Earth, a world covered mostly in water. They had somehow managed to develop space travel despite their primitive technology, and had been claiming territory that belonged to established civilizations. What puzzled the hegemony scientists was how humans had achieved faster-than-light travel without the usual technological prerequisites. Most species discovered antimatter manipulation, then exotic matter physics, and finally learned to fold space-time. Humans appeared to have skipped several steps in the normal progression of scientific advancement. "Sir, all ships report ready for hyperspace," announced Rixtel. Space twisted around the massive fleet as 200 warships vanished from normal space-time. The journey to the Sol system would take 6 hours at maximum hyperspace velocity. Kethtar used the time to study tactical projections and review standard first contact protocols. The hegemony preferred to solve conflicts through demonstration rather than actual warfare. A show of overwhelming force usually convinced younger species to accept their place in the galactic order. Humans would see the fleet, recognize their hopeless situation, and agree to withdraw from contested territories, if they were smart. "Admiral, we're receiving updates from forward reconnaissance," said Velthos. "Mining operations, sir. Massive ones." Kethtar frowned. Excessive resource extraction often indicated a species preparing for war, but against what enemy? Until now, humans had only encountered primitive races barely capable of spaceflight. "Sir, we're also detecting radio transmissions from multiple human colonies," added Velthos. "The content is, they're not discussing surrender or negotiation. The transmission suggests they're actually mobilizing for conflict." This gave Kethtar pause. How could humans possibly know about the fleet's approach? Zephyrian ships were equipped with the most advanced stealth technology available. Detection should be impossible until they dropped out of hyperspace. Could be a coincidence, suggested Zendar. Perhaps, Kethtar agreed, though something about the situation bothered him. Unknown, sir. Our long-range sensors can't penetrate that far into their system. The hours passed slowly. Kethtar found himself thinking about the reports from human-occupied territories. The mammals had taken those systems quickly and efficiently, often without major battles. This suggested either that their opponents had been very weak or that humans were more capable than intelligence reports indicated. Approaching Sol system, announced Rixtel. Kethtar positioned himself at the center of the bridge, ready to assess the situation and issue appropriate commands. Around him, his officers prepared their stations for immediate action. 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Reality snapped back into focus as the fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. Immediately, sensors began gathering data about human defenses, ship positions, and military capabilities. What they found would change everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare. But for now, Kethtar stood confidently on his bridge, still believing that he commanded the most powerful military force these humans had ever seen. In a few hours, he would learn exactly how wrong that assumption was. The moment the Zephyrian fleet appeared in Sol system, every sensor array began working at maximum capacity. Kethtar expected to see a handful of primitive human vessels scrambling to mount some kind of defense. Instead, his sensors showed him something that made no sense. Sir, long-range scans are detecting a single large object approaching from the asteroid belt, reported sensor operator Thylus, her voice uncertain. It's... Kethtar asked, moving to look over her shoulder at the display. Approximately 30 kilometers in length. Mass readings are... Kethtar stared at the numbers on the screen. 30 kilometers was massive even by hegemony standards. His own flagship was only 8 kilometers long, and it was considered one of the largest vessels ever built. That can't be right. Sensors are functioning normally, sir. Velthos looked up from her communication station, confusion clear on her face. Sir, I'm intercepting human transmissions, Zendar repeated. Unknown, sir, but based on their radio chatter, this doesn't seem to be their entire fleet. Kethtar felt the first stirring of unease. Intelligence reports had suggested humans possessed maybe 50 ships total. If this single massive vessel was just one among many, then their estimates were seriously wrong. He asked, Antimatter reactor? Thylus shook her head. That's the strange part, sir. We're not detecting any of the usual energy patterns. No antimatter signatures, no exotic matter manipulation, no spatial distortion fields. It's almost like the ship is powered by... That's impossible. Sir, the ship is definitely moving, Rixtel confirmed from the navigation station. Kethtar studied the tactical display. The human ship was still several million kilometers away, but it was approaching in a straight line directly toward his fleet. No evasive maneuvers, no attempt to use the system's planets for cover, no sign of fear or hesitation. He asked. No, sir, Velthos replied. No attempts at communication, no surrender offers, no requests for negotiation. They're just... This wasn't how first contact usually worked. Most species, when faced with a vastly superior force, at least tried to talk. They sent diplomatic messages, offered tributes, or begged for mercy. Humans were doing none of these things. Kethtar asked. At current acceleration, approximately 4 hours, Zendar calculated. Kethtar considered the question. Standard procedure would be to advance and demonstrate the fleet's power. But something about this situation felt wrong. The human ship's approach was too confident, too direct. Maintain current position. Let them come to us. As the minutes passed, more details about the human ship became clear. The vessel's hull wasn't smooth like civilized spacecraft. Instead, it appeared to be covered in angular protrusions, sensor arrays, and what looked like weapon mountings. "Sir, detailed scans are showing hundreds of individual systems across the ship's surface," Thylus reported. "Unknown, sir." Velthos raised her head from her station. "Sir, I'm detecting more transmissions." Zendar input the terms into the tactical computer. "Sir, our database has no record of most of these weapon types. Kinetic penetrators appears to refer to solid projectiles fired at high velocity." "Unknown, sir." Kethtar was beginning to realize that their intelligence about human capabilities might be dangerously incomplete. Everything about this ship suggested a level of military sophistication that didn't match reports of primitive chemical rockets and metal projectiles. "Sir, the human vessel is changing configuration," Thylus announced. "Hull sections are moving. It looks like..." On the main display, the human vessel's outline was shifting. Sections of the hull extended outward, revealing previously hidden structures. What had looked like a single large ship was revealing itself to be something far more complex. "Thermal sensors are detecting massive heat buildup along the ship's spine," reported Thylus. "There wasn't, sir, but now..." The bridge fell silent. Every officer stared at the display, watching the human ship continue its transformation. Whatever they were dealing with, it wasn't the primitive vessel they had expected. Asked Zendar. Kethtar hesitated. 200 Zephyrian warships represented enough firepower to sterilize entire planets. The idea that a single human ship could pose a serious threat seemed impossible, but the evidence was mounting that humans were not what they appeared to be. "Send a general alert to all ships. Battle stations, but do not power weapons yet." The bridge speakers crackled with static, then cleared to reveal a human voice speaking in their strange, harsh language. Velthos had activated the translation system, and words appeared on the display screen. "This is HSS Retribution to unknown alien fleet. You have entered human space without permission. You have 1 minute to reverse course and leave this system." Kethtar felt a surge of anger. 1 minute? A single human ship was giving ultimatums to the most powerful fleet in the galaxy? "Open a channel," he commanded. "This is Admiral Kethtar of the Zephyrian Hegemony. You will immediately surrender your vessel and prepare to be boarded. You are vastly outnumbered and outgunned." There was a long pause. Then the human voice returned, and this time Kethtar could hear something in the tone that chilled him to his core. The human was laughing. "Admiral," the voice said, "you have no idea what you're dealing with." Kethtar cut the transmission and turned to his tactical officer. "Signal the fleet. All ships, prepare for combat." But deep down, Kethtar was beginning to suspect that he might have seriously underestimated humanity's capabilities. The ship approaching his fleet wasn't acting like the product of a primitive civilization. It was acting like a predator. As the human warship drew closer, the details became clearer and more disturbing. What Kethtar had initially taken for crude construction was revealing itself to be something far more sinister. The HSS Retribution wasn't just a ship. It was a weapon designed by minds that understood warfare in ways the hegemony had never imagined. "Sir, we're getting detailed surface scans now," Thylus reported, her voice tight with growing alarm. "The hull isn't smooth metal like our ships." "Layered defensive systems, sir. Our scans suggest the outer hull can actually explode outward to deflect incoming attacks, while inner layers provide additional protection." Kethtar studied the tactical display. Zephyrian ships were built for efficiency and elegance. Their energy shields could deflect most attacks, making heavy armor unnecessary. The human approach seemed wasteful and primitive, yet something about it worried him. "Weapon systems, sir. Hundreds of them." Each one appears to be independently powered and targeted. Zendar looked up from his station, confusion clear on his scaled features. Sir, this doesn't make tactical sense. Why would they mount so many different weapon types on a single ship? The implication hung in the air. Most civilized species developed weapons to fight specific threats: energy shields, kinetic barriers, or particular armor types. Humans seem to have designed their ship to fight everything at once. Sir, the ship's flight pattern is unusual, Rixtel observed. Most vessels would approach in an energy-efficient curve to conserve fuel. Maybe they don't care about fuel efficiency, suggested Velthos. Or maybe they have so much fuel that efficiency doesn't matter, Kethtar said grimly. On the main display, the human ship continued its relentless approach. There was something deeply unsettling about its movement. Direct, aggressive, without any of the graceful maneuvering that characterized advanced spaceflight. Thermal readings are increasing across the entire hull, Thyalis announced. All systems? Sir, our computers are having difficulty cataloging everything. The ship appears to have redundant systems for redundant systems. This was completely alien to Zephyrian military thinking. Their ships were marvels of engineering efficiency, every component precisely designed and positioned for maximum effectiveness. The human approach seemed almost insane in its redundancy. Sir, I'm detecting movement along the ship's hull, Thyalis continued. Sections are... On the display, the human vessel was changing shape again. Parts of the hull that had appeared to be simple armor plating were revealing themselves to be weapon platforms, sensor arrays, and systems that defied immediate classification. Kethtar had to agree. The transformation was both fascinating and terrifying. The ship was literally reconstructing itself as it approached, adapting its configuration for the coming battle. Sir, we're detecting launch signatures, Zendar announced urgently. Unknown, sir. Whatever they are, they're small and very fast. Kethtar watched as clouds of tiny objects separated from the human ship and began spreading throughout local space. They moved in patterns too complex for random deployment. There was definitely intelligence guiding their distribution. Probes, Velthos said suddenly. I think they're reconnaissance probes. No, sir. They're using a communication method we don't recognize. Quantum entanglement, maybe? Kethtar felt a chill run down his spine. Instantaneous communication across interplanetary distances was technology the hegemony had been trying to develop for centuries. If humans had mastered it, their scientific capabilities were far more advanced than anyone had suspected. Sir, the probes are taking detailed scans of our shield generators, weapon systems, and hull composition, Thyalis reported. Sir, they're too small and too fast. Kethtar realized with growing dread that the humans had just conducted a complete intelligence-gathering operation on his entire fleet, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Worse, they had done it using technology his people couldn't even detect properly, let alone counter. He asked. 12 million kilometers and closing. Sir, Velthos interrupted, I'm intercepting internal human communications. They appear to be planning which of our ships to destroy first and in what order for maximum tactical advantage. Sir, they're treating this like... The bridge fell silent. Around the galaxy, fleet commanders were respected for their tactical brilliance, their ability to maneuver ships and coordinate attacks. The humans seemed to have reduced the coming battle to a mathematical equation. Input variables, run calculations, execute optimal solution. Thyalis shouted. On the display, a section of the human ship's nose was beginning to glow with intense energy. But unlike the clean, focused beams that hegemony weapons produced, this looked raw and violent. Adi Mista, Kethtar demanded. Sir, it's not like anything in our database. It appears to be contained stellar matter. Kethtar stared at the display in horror. Containing stellar matter required technology that the hegemony considered purely theoretical. The energy requirements alone should have been impossible for a ship-mounted weapon. The voice that came through the speakers was calm and professional, which somehow made it more terrifying than if the human had been screaming threats. Admiral Kethtar, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the HSS Retribution. You now have 4 minutes to begin retreating from this system. Kethtar snarled, I have 200 ships. There was a pause, then the human captain's voice returned, and Kethtar could hear the smile in her words. Admiral, you're thinking like prey. You see numbers and assume they matter. We've been studying your fleet since you arrived. We know your shield frequencies, your weapon capabilities, your reactor signatures, and your tactical protocols. We've run the combat simulations. The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Kethtar looked at the display showing the approaching human ship. 200 hegemony vessels against 1 human warship. By every measure of military logic he understood, this should be an easy victory. So why did he suddenly feel like he was leading his fleet to slaughter? The 4 minutes passed like hours. Every second brought the human ship closer, and with each kilometer more horrifying details became visible to the Zephyrian sensors. What had initially appeared to be a single massive vessel was revealing itself to be something far worse. A mobile weapons platform designed by a species that had turned destruction into an art form. Sir, visual contact established, Thylus announced, her voice barely steady. The bridge fell silent as the HSS Retribution filled their viewing screen. Every officer stared in growing horror at what they were seeing. The ship was wrong. Not just different from hegemony designs, but fundamentally, terrifyingly wrong. Where Zephyrian vessels were sleek and elegant, flowing lines designed for efficiency and beauty, the human warship looked like a predator's nightmare given form. The hull was covered in angular protrusions that served no apparent function except to make the ship look more threatening. Weapon barrels jutted from the surface like fangs, each one independently articulated and tracking different targets in Kethtar's fleet. The entire vessel seemed to bristle with menace, as if every surface had been designed to inspire fear. Sir, detailed analysis of the weapon systems, Zendar reported, his 6 eyes wide with disbelief. We're detecting over 3,000 individual weapons of various types. Kinetic cannons that can fire projectiles at 60% of light speed. Fusion missiles with independent guidance systems. Kethtar repeated, struggling to process the number. Sir, it gets worse, Thylus added. The hull itself appears to be modular. Sections can be jettisoned if damaged, and replacement modules can be installed during combat. Velthos looked up from her communications station, her face pale with terror. Sir, I'm intercepting more human transmissions. They appear to be calculating how much damage they can take while still maintaining combat effectiveness. Sir, they're planning to let us hurt them. The revelation struck Kethtar like a physical blow. The hegemony's approach to warfare was based on avoiding damage through superior shields and tactics. Humans seemed to have designed their ship to absorb massive damage and continue fighting. Sir, energy readings are off the charts, Thylus announced. The human ship is generating more power than our entire fleet. Unknown, sir. Our scientists said portable fusion reactors that large were impossible. Kethtar stared at the human ship, trying to understand what he was seeing. What if they're using something else entirely? The implication was staggering. If humans had developed fusion technology that surpassed hegemony science, how many other advantages did they possess? Sir, the human ship is beginning final approach, Rixtel reported. Range, 2 million kilometers. All ships prepare to engage, Kethtar ordered. Target their main reactor. Thylus interrupted. Multiple reactor signatures. 20 reactors. Even if they destroyed 19, the ship could keep fighting. Kethtar felt his confidence crumbling as he realized the true scope of human military engineering. Sir, the human ship is changing again, Zendar observed. On the display, The HSS Retribution was undergoing another transformation. Hull sections were sliding apart, revealing internal structures that had been hidden during approach. What they saw made every alien on the bridge recoil in horror. The ship's interior was hollow, but not empty. It was filled with weapons. Massive kinetic accelerators ran the entire length of the vessel. Missile fabrication facilities could be seen producing ammunition in real time. Robotic systems moved along the interior surfaces, making adjustments and preparations for combat. "It's not a ship," whispered one of the junior officers. "Sir, we're detecting movement along the outer hull," Thialus reported. "The armor plating is—" The ship's surface was revealing hidden depths. What had appeared to be simple armor was actually layered defensive systems. Outer plates could absorb impacts and explosions, while inner layers provided backup protection. Between the layers, automated systems worked to repair damage and maintain structural integrity. Captain Chen's voice filled the bridge, calm and professional despite the magnitude of the confrontation. "Admiral Kethtar, your 4 minutes have expired." Kethtar shouted, "We can negotiate! There's no need for—" "Admiral," Chen interrupted, "you entered our system with a fleet of warships. You ignored our warning to leave. You have made your intentions clear." There was a pause, and when Chen spoke again, Kethtar could hear genuine puzzlement in her voice. "Admiral, why do you think numbers matter? You brought sailing ships to fight a battleship." The transmission ended, and immediately the human ship's weapons began to activate. Energy readings spiked as systems that had been dormant suddenly came online. The ship's hull began to glow as excess heat from the massive power systems radiated into space. "Sir, they're targeting our entire fleet simultaneously," Zendar reported in disbelief. "That's impossible." "Sir, they're not using a targeting computer. Each weapon has its own artificial intelligence." Kethtar stared at the tactical display showing targeting vectors spreading out from the human ship like a web of death. Every ship in his fleet was being tracked by multiple weapon systems. If the humans opened fire, there would be nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Zendar asked desperately. Kethtar looked at his fleet. 200 of the finest warships ever built, crewed by the best officers in the galaxy. Then he looked at the human ship, a single vessel that somehow outgunned, outshielded, and outmaneuvered everything the hegemony could field. Captain Chen's voice was sad now, almost regretful. "Admiral, you're about to learn why humans have been so successful at claiming new territory. It's not because we're lucky, or because we're particularly clever." The human ship's main weapon, the contained stellar matter cannon, began to charge. Energy readings climbed beyond anything the Zephyrian sensors had ever recorded. Kethtar shouted, but even as he gave the order, he knew it was too late. The human ship hadn't been approaching them for 4 minutes. It had been positioning itself for the perfect killing shot. And now, 200 of the galaxy's finest warships were about to learn what happened when prey tried to challenge an apex predator. The first shot from the HSS Retribution was like watching a star being born and die in the same instant. The contained stellar matter cannon discharged, sending a beam of pure nuclear fire across the void. The energy was so intense that it briefly outshone the distant sun, and when it struck the Zephyrian heavy cruiser Vigilant, the ship simply ceased to exist. There was no explosion, no debris field, no time for the crew to send final transmissions. One moment the Vigilant was there, and the next moment there was only empty space and the fading glow of vaporized atoms. "Impossible," Zendar whispered. "Their shields should have held." "Sir, energy analysis of the human weapon," Thialus reported, her voice shaking. The beam reached temperatures exceeding stellar core fusion. Kethtar stared at the empty space where one of his finest ships had been. The Vigilant had carried 800 crew members, experienced officers, skilled technicians, beings with families and hopes and dreams. Now they were scattered atoms drifting in the solar wind. He commanded. 200 Zephyrian vessels unleashed everything they had. Plasma beams, antimatter torpedoes, particle cannons, and exotic matter disruptors filled the space between the fleets with deadly energy. The combined firepower was enough to destroy entire planets. The human ship met the attack head-on, and Kethtar watched in horror as his greatest weapons proved utterly ineffective. The plasma beams struck the ship's reactive armor and were absorbed by layers of heat-dispersing materials. The antimatter torpedoes detonated against energy barriers that simply redirected the explosions harmlessly into space. The particle cannons met counterbeams that neutralized their effects. But it was the exotic matter disruptors that truly demonstrated the hopelessness of the situation. These weapons attacked the fundamental structure of matter itself, making atoms forget how to hold together. They had never failed against any known defense. The human ship's hull flickered briefly as the disruptors struck, then returned to normal. Somehow, the humans had developed armor that could resist attacks on the quantum level. "Sir, minimal damage to the human vessel," Zendar reported in despair. But the human response was immediate and devastating. Instead of charging their main weapon again, they opened fire with hundreds of smaller systems. Kinetic rounds moving at relativistic speeds punched through Zephyrian shields like they were tissue paper. Fusion warheads detonated inside ship hulls, turning proud vessels into expanding clouds of radioactive debris. "Sir, we're losing ships faster than I can count," Velthos cried out. Kethtar realized with growing terror that the human artificial intelligences were learning their tactical patterns in real time. Every evasive maneuver, every defensive formation, every attempt at coordinated attack was being analyzed and countered within seconds. "Sir, the human ship is moving," Rixtel announced. "It's..." On the display, the massive human warship was accelerating directly toward the center of the Zephyrian formation. This violated every principle of naval combat. No sane captain would charge into the middle of an enemy fleet. Unless that captain knew something the enemy didn't. Kethtar ordered. The remaining ships of his fleet concentrated their fire on the human ship. For a moment, it seemed like the combined attack might overwhelm even their advanced defenses. The ship's hull glowed white-hot under the assault, and several outer armor sections exploded away from the main structure. But the ship kept coming. "Sir, the human vessel is reconfiguring again," Thylus reported. "The damaged sections are being jettisoned, and new ones are extending from the interior." Kethtar watched in fascination and horror as the human ship literally rebuilt itself while under fire. Damaged weapon systems were replaced by fresh ones. Destroyed armor sections were discarded while backup layers took their place. The ship was designed not just to take damage, but to shed its wounds and continue fighting. "Sir, the humans are opening launch bays," Zendar announced. "They're deploying..." Swarms of smaller vessels poured from the human ship like angry insects. Each one was barely 50 meters long, but they moved with deadly purpose and impossible speed. Kethtar asked. "Unknown, sir. They're too fast for our point defense systems to track. And, sir, no life support systems, no crew quarters, no biological beings aboard." The drone swarms spread throughout the Zephyrian formation with terrifying efficiency. Each one was equipped with weapons designed specifically to exploit weaknesses in hegemony ship design. They targeted shield generators, reactor cores, and command centers with surgical precision. Velthos screamed as another ship exploded in the distance. Kethtar realized that the humans had turned warfare into an industrial process. While other species built ships to carry crews into battle, humans had built machines specifically designed to kill other machines. No fear, no hesitation, no mercy. "Sir, incoming priority transmission," Velthos announced. The human captain's voice was as calm as ever, despite the carnage surrounding her ship. "Admiral Kethtar, I'm prepared to accept the surrender of your remaining vessels. Kethtar looked at his tactical display. Of his original 200 ships, fewer than 50 remained operational. Admiral, this was never about mercy. This was about sending a message. You came here to demonstrate hegemony power. Kethtar felt the weight of realization crushing down upon him. There was a long pause before Chen answered, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of terrible truth. We're what happens when evolution decides that a species needs to be very, very good at killing things. Our planet didn't just have predators, Admiral. Our planet was a predator. Another Zephyrian ship exploded in the background as Chen continued. We didn't develop space travel to explore or trade, Admiral. We developed it to escape our own world, but we brought our survival instincts with us. But you're offering surrender terms, Kethtar said desperately. No, Admiral. That suggests we're practical. Dead enemies can't warn others about human capabilities. The full horror of the situation finally dawned on Kethtar. This hadn't been a battle. It had been a demonstration. The humans could have destroyed his entire fleet in the first minute, but they had chosen to drag out the engagement to show exactly how outclassed the hegemony military truly was. Kethtar looked at his remaining ships, at his surviving crews, at the human vessel that had just redefined what was possible in space warfare. He thought about the reports he would have to send back to Hegemony High Command, assuming he lived long enough to send them. Signal all ships, he said quietly. Stand down weapons. As his fleet powered down their weapons, Kethtar opened a channel to the human ship. Captain Chen, this is Admiral Kethtar. Acknowledged, Admiral. Chen's answer chilled him to his core. Admiral, the Retribution is just one ship from our third exploration fleet. We have 7 active fleets, each with over 100 vessels. As Kethtar ended the transmission and began preparing his final report to Hegemony High Command, he realized that the galaxy had just learned a terrible truth. Humans weren't just another spacefaring species seeking their place among the stars. They were apex predators who had finally decided that the entire galaxy was their hunting ground, and nothing in the known universe was strong enough to stop them.